Yo, what's good, everybody? It's your boy Durag D. I told y'all I would be back with the top rankings at every position, man, and I'm not a liar. So we got you with our running backs today, man. So tune in. Don't forget to hit that like, comment, subscribe, follow, send it, share your friends, all that good stuff. Without further ado, I got Bijan Robinson number one, man. Bijan Robinson is just an absolute terror at the running back position. He might be the most talented back in the league. He's in what should be one of the better offenses in the league. He catches passes. He's explosive. He can take a 5-yard run and make it a 75-yard touchdown. He doesn't come off the field. He's a workhorse back. He's young, prime of his career, no injury history. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on why I have Bijan Robinson number one, but I mean, honestly, I would just tell you why I have him over the guy I have number two, and that's Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley is a guy who easily could finish as the RB1 once again, but the reason I have Bijan Robinson isn't some Madden curse or, oh, well, we never see the RB1 repeat. No, it's nothing like that. It's the fact that Bijan Robinson, he's just going to be more involved in the passing game. We saw last year. Saquon really wasn't involved in the passing game. Bijan Robinson's been hovering around 500 yards each season receiving, and they've even talked him up about getting him more involved in the passing game. And when I look at this offense, I see Drake London, I see Kyle Pitts, I see Darnell Mooney, and I see Bijan Robinson. Now, when I look at the Eagles offense, I see talent all over the field. I see talent galore. I see more talent than the Falcons, rather should I say, because they got A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. I mean, they got former first-round pick Jahan Dotson. They got Dallas Goedert. I mean, they got a lot of talent. They got Jalen Hurts, who wants to run the ball as well. So they got a lot of mouths to feed out there in Philadelphia. And can he replicate that season where he's seemingly breaking 60-yard touchdowns every week, Saquon last year? So that's why I got Bijan. I think he'll be more involved in the passing game. And, we saw from Saquon last year with the tush push, he didn't score as many touchdowns as, he probably should have. So with the fact that I believe Saquon only had 11 touchdowns last year, and with the tush push, that could hover around the same number, and Bijan could easily have 15 plus this year. I'm taking Bijan over Saquon every day of the week. Now, another guy who, if he was just, in a backfield by himself, I would take over Saquon. But since he has to share a backfield, I can't take Jahmyr Gibbs, who I got number 3. I can't take him over Saquon just because David Montgomery is going to take carries between the 20s. He's going to take some goal line work. But Gibbs, just like Bijan Robinson, man, he young back, prime of his career, no real injury history, explosive, can take a 5-yard run, make it a 75-yard touchdown, catches passes. He honestly isn't a workhorse and does come off the field, so that's why he's not in that tier with Bijan and Saquon Barkley. But don't let him fall too far just because David Montgomery. He's still a top 3 back and could finish as the overall RB1 because he's a touchdown machine in one of the best offenses in the league behind one of the best offensive lines. So Jahmyr Gibbs shot him RB3. Now my RB4 might have him a little high, but that's Devon Achane, man. Devon Achane is arguably the best pass catching back in the NFL. He had a crazy amount of targets, led the Dolphins last year. I mean, it seemed like he was catching like 6-7 passes every week. He was almost a pseudo wide receiver at times. So Devon Achane, as long as Tua is healthy, he actually averaged more points per game than Saquon last year when Tua was healthy. So as long as Tua is healthy, he's the guy that should easily finish top 5 because he doesn't even have to run the ball. That's the thing. He doesn't need 2,000 yards to finish as the RB1. He catches a ton of passes. So in your PPR league, Devon Achane's got to be top 5. And honestly, what should be an approved offense from last year, Mike McDaniel is supposed to be an offensive genius. So as long as they can get back to what they were, Devon Achane is easily a top 5 back. And I'm rounding out the top 5, a guy who could easily be number 1 if we knew his health status. Well, we kind of do, but we kind of don't. And that's CMC. I can't have CMC any lower. He could easily be the RB1 overall if he just stayed healthy. It's just, who can really trust this man's health at this point? It's like a 50-50 shot. This man's either a top 2 RB or he plays 2 games. And I just can't trust that type of coin flip, that type of risk reward when my fantasy season is on the line. But I can't have him any lower. Then 5, he's still one of the most talented backs. He's still crazy explosive. You could argue maybe not in the prime of his career, but he's still one of the best backs in the league in one of the most explosive offenses, especially for running back. One of the best rushing attacks in the league. He catches a ton of passes. He's one of the biggest workhorses in the league. Doesn't come off the field. His snap share, his touch share is absolutely insane. He gets red zone touches. I mean, we all know the story with CMC. Now, moving on to Derrick Henry, who I got at number 6, man, he just keeps chugging along, man. It doesn't matter. This guy is an absolute super freak at the running back position. This guy almost had 2,000 yards last year himself, averaging almost 6 yards a carry, man. This guy was on another level. But the reason I can't have him top 5 is pretty simple, man. He just doesn't catch passes. I think he had like 18 receptions all of last year. He just and we've seen games where Justice Hill outsnaps him because the Ravens are down and they have to pass. He can get games scripted out. That's always a worry. But the thing is, it's not going to be a lot because the Ravens are a really good team. They've got a really good defense. So he's involved a lot. But in those games where they do have to pass, he can get games scripted out. And at times he can feel touchdown or bust. But I mean, when you're Derrick Henry and you're going for almost 2,000 yards and double-digit touchdowns, I gotta have you as a top 6 back. And I can't have a rookie like Ashton Jeanty, who I have at number 7, ahead of you. Ashton Jeanty is an absolute super freak of a prospect, one of the best running back prospects we've seen in the last decade. I mean, almost broke Barry Sanders' rushing record. I don't care if he did it at Boise State or if he did it at Kung Pao Chicken University. Like, I don't care. He did something that we almost never seen before. Single-handedly got Boise State to the playoff, yada, yada, yada. He's explosive. He can catch passes. He's in on offense begging, and I mean begging for rushing production. The worst rushing attack last year was the Las Vegas Raiders. Drafted him 6th overall, drafted him high. He should be a workhorse back. My only reservations are how good is this offense going to be? And, is he going to be a true workhorse from week 1? I do believe that, mid-season to late season, he could be the RB1, honestly, because he touched the ball so much. But early season, are they going to give him the work? Are they going to try to force feed it to Sincere McCormick or Raheem Mostert or someone else? So I got Jeanty at number 7. Now, number 8, and this might be a little high for Chase Brown, but I got Chase Brown, man. I don't know how he isn't, borderline top 5 on more people's boards, because after the Zach Moss injury last year and he just got injured again, man, he was a top 3 back in fantasy. He was catching a ton of passes because that's all the Bengals do is pass, scoring a bunch of points because they're one of the best offenses in the NFL. Now, my reservation with him are his rushing production because they don't run the ball a lot. They don't run the ball a lot, in the red zone, at the goal line. It's a lot of passing. So he might not get the rushing touchdowns you're looking for, but he was on the field a ton. They had no one who could really back him up. And, it's same song, second verse this year. Zach Moss is already injured. They drafted Taj Brooks in like the 6th round. So, I mean, is he going to take touches? I don't know. But if Chase Brown is going to get 80, 85, 90% of the snaps, he'll be a top 5 back once again in that offense, no doubt about it. Now, coming in at number 9, I got Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs was an absolute monster down the stretch last year. He wasn't scoring touchdowns early in the season. Once he started scoring touchdowns, he just couldn't stop. It was like going downhill when you're snowboarding. He just couldn't stop whatsoever. And he scored at least once every game, it felt like. Sometimes he was scoring 2, 3 times. And he actually, believe it or not, led the NFL in touches in the first quarter. So he was a tone setter for this team. He was the guy who came out and, established what type of day it was going to be. He was their tone setter, and I believe it's going to be the same song, second verse this year. I still don't believe in their wide receiver core. Their tight end core is iffy, solid, but nothing special. They don't have anything special on the perimeter or in the pass catcher department to speak of. They're going to be a running football team once again. So, and last year, Emmanuel Wilson and the Lloyd back, they just couldn't stay healthy. So we'll see this year, if those guys are healthier, if they do take, snaps, and if they do take carries and catches away from Jacobs, who, was involved solid in the passing game as well. So Josh Jacobs is a guy who, he may not finish as the RB1 overall, but he's got, top 5, top 6 upside for sure. Now, moving into number 10, rounding out the top 10, I got Bucky Irving, the guy who can do no wrong, the next best running back in the NFL coming up. Bucky Irving was a monster last year down the stretch, man. And he was doing it on like 50% of the snaps as well. Rachaad White was still getting a lot of run, but down the stretch, in their last 2 games, and I saw it firsthand against my Commanders in the playoffs, it was all Bucky Irving. And when I say all Bucky Irving, I mean Rachaad White touched the ball like 1 or 2 times, legitimately. When their season was on the line, it was purely Bucky Irving. And he's the guy that if he's going to get that type of snap share, then I might have to move him up ahead of Genty. Like I might have to move him up right behind Henry, right in front of Henry, honestly. Because although, Rachaad White's still going to be their pass catching back, he's still going to be the guy on third down. Bucky Irving was just so efficient, averaging over 5 yards per carry. I mean, he was just awesome. And he was the reason that their offense went to another level in terms of rushing. Went from 1,300 yards with Rachaad White as their RB1 to 2,600 yards with Bucky Irving as their RB1. So I got him RB10, Bucky Irving. And moving on into number 11, this is a guy who, you could argue he should be higher. I don't know with Jonathan Taylor, man. A lot of his production came in those final 3 or 4 games, and people love him for what he did in the fantasy playoffs. And I love a league winner just as much as everyone else, but season long, if you really had Jonathan Taylor, you felt that he didn't pay off his ADP. He didn't pay off. He wasn't worth the tag that, you paid for him. He was a guy that was up and down with the offense. They had poor quarterback play for most of the year. Flacco came in for some weeks and, gave a little bit of life to the offense. But overall, Jonathan Taylor, he's not a pass catcher. He's a guy that, he's kind of like Derrick Henry light. But the problem is he's not as good as Derrick Henry. And this offense isn't as good as the Ravens. So he can get games scripted out. He can, he's not going to catch passes. So if they're losing, which they might be doing a lot of this year, he's not going to get passes. And if he's not scoring touchdowns and running for 80, 100-plus yards, he's not going to be giving you a lot. And that's something that I fear with Jonathan Taylor. But he's still one of the most talented backs. He's an explosive runner. He's still, relatively young and explosive back, a guy that can turn a 5-yard run into a 75-yard touchdown as well. Just doesn't catch the passes. And, with this touchdown upside being kind of capped with 2 rushing quarterbacks now, Daniel Jones can rush. Anthony Richardson obviously can run. Jonathan Taylor, I got him at 11. Now we moving into number 12. I got Kyron Williams. He has to be an RB1 in your ranking. He's another guy like Chase Brown. He's on the field so much. He gets so many snaps, dude. It's just 80% plus, 85% plus. Now the problem is his pass catching role is gone. He doesn't catch passes anymore, and I honestly don't know why. And I don't think that's going to change this year with them bringing in Devontae Adams and drafting a second-round tight end in Ferguson. I really don't think that's going to change, but he still touches the ball a ton. He's got weekly touchdown upside every single week because this offense should be good. They should be near the goal line a lot this year. So Kyron Williams is a guy, even though he's not the talent of, JT, Bucky Irving, Jacob, Chase Brown, Genty, and those guys, he touches the ball so much in a good enough offense and what should be a top 10, top 8 offense. You got to have Kyron Williams as a top 12 back. Now, number 13, and this guy can finish higher just because of the scheme he's in, that's Amari Hampton. Especially with the Najee Harris news that we don't know when he's going to play because of this eye injury now. Man, Amari Hampton could be a top 6, 7 back, no question about it, because with this offensive line, with this scheme, with that defense that's not going to let up a lot of points, they are primed to run the football a ton once again, and the beneficiary is going to be Amari Hampton this year. He was a first-round pick for a reason. He's got a ton of talent. He's obviously young, no injury history, not the prime of his career, but, young running backs are the ones that break out the most, obviously. He's a pass catcher. He can play all 3 downs. So with Najee Harris being hurt, if he's a 3-down back in this offense, it could be spooky out there in LA for Amari Hampton if you draft him. He could be a steal of the draft. Now, next, we got Breece Hall. Breece Hall is a guy that he's got all the talent in the world, man. He really does. He's explosive, young. He's got an injury history. Obviously, tore his ACL his rookie year. Hasn't really been the same since. but, he's been an elite pass catcher. He catches a ton of passes. And you may think, Justin Fields not going to dump it down, but he actually has one of the highest dump down rates in the NFL when he's a starter. So Breece Hall is a guy who could actually finish even higher than this. I've got him 14, but he could finish top 10 easily. If this Jets offense is better than what we, project, a lot of people don't think it'll be very good. I think it'll be solid, but will it be good enough for him to be an RB1? I'm not sure. So I got him at 14. Coming in at 15, I got Kenneth Walker, man. Ken Walker is a guy who he always gets off to great starts. Like the first 3 games of the season, he kills it. And he's a guy, you can trade for pretty much, whatever you want in the first 3 weeks, but you hold him and then he gets banged up. His role kind of diminishes. He starts to wear down. He's not as explosive. And he ends up being a guy that you regret drafting. But if he can stay healthy for a 17-game season, he can actually be an RB1 easy. He could be a top 7, top 8 back in fantasy because he was actually getting a lot of targets last year, especially for Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker's not known as a pass catcher, but he was actually getting a nice amount of targets last year, on top of being explosive, young, prime of his career. Now, he is a guy that has injury history, seemingly banged up, questionable every week after the first month or so. So you do have to be worried about his health throughout the season. But if the questions were just talent and opportunity, because that's what it is with running backs. It's opportunity. How much opportunity are you going to get? How good is the offense going to be? Got him at 15 because I don't know how good the offense is going to be. And there's question marks around his long-term health. There's like there is, every running back, but he's shown the history that he can't stay healthy for 17 games. Now, moving on into 16, you could easily argue this guy over Ken Walker. These next 2 guys, honestly, over Ken Walker, and you wouldn't get an argument from me. That's Chuba Hubbard and that's DeAndre Swift. Chuba Hubbard, one of the most slept on, one of the most underrated running backs in the NFL. Don't let Chuba slide, man. This offense should be even better. They brought in Tedder or McMillan. He should take attention off of the running game. Hopefully Xavier Leggett takes a step. Adam Thielen can come back healthy, can be a slot threat. Bryce Young takes another step. This offense should be solid with Dave Canales' second year. We saw what he did for Baker Mayfield. This offense should be much improved. And if it is, Chuba Hubbard's going to be even better. He was already a top 10 running back last year in fantasy. And if this offense gets better and, Chuba can maybe even himself take a step forward because he's entering the prime of his career, man, he could honestly be top 8 again. I don't know why he couldn't. My only reservations are, they did bring in Rico Dowdle, who had 1,000 yards last year for the Cowboys. And they also drafted Trevor Etienne, Travis's little brother, in the later rounds. So if they do take any work away, then I'll be a little worried, but I'll believe it when I see it. So I got Chuba Hubbard 16, and Swift I got 17. He's a guy he could finish. He could be the surprise, Bucky Irving of I wouldn't say Bucky Irving, but he could be a huge surprise. He's going in the mid rounds. He's a guy I'm targeting everywhere in my fantasy drafts because he's going to be the clear RB1 in a Ben Johnson offense where they just bolstered the offensive line and they need a running game so that their young quarterback doesn't have to do too much. And when he came out of college, he was known as a prolific pass catcher. This guy has, crushing his ADP written all over him. And DeAndre Swift, he's more than talented enough. His only deficiency in his career so far has been nagging injuries and then lack of goal line success. He's actually horrible at the goal line. So, as long as he can fix the goal line issue or, maybe get a little more volume, be more efficient, there's no reason DeAndre Swift can't be a top 12 back and be an RB1 in fantasy. And moving on into James Conner, he's another guy. If he can stay healthy, man, he could finish as a top 15 back, and I got him at 18 here now because Trey Benson, they've been talking him up. They've been saying, it might be a 2-back system. They're going to be, RB by committee, whatever the case may be. And, man, Kyler Murray, the head of the snake is Kyler Murray at the end of the day. And I just don't believe in Kyler Murray. I really don't. I've believed in him before, over and over, and he's made me look like a fool year after year. And I'm done. I'm done with Kyler Murray. I'm done with the whole Cardinals offense, honestly. The only reason I'm putting Conner here is because, he's a decent talent and he's going to get the volume, and it's all about opportunity at the running back position. And moving on to number 19, I got Travion Henderson. Travion Henderson, rookie for the Patriots, he's a guy. He's better than Ramondre Stevenson right now. He's much more explosive. He's obviously younger. Neither one really has an injury history, but Ramondre is not known for his explosion. He's kind of 3 yards in the clouds of dust kind of guy. But Travion Henderson brings a new wave, a new lightning to the thunder, if you will, for this offense. And he's a great pass protector. That's an easy way for rookies to get on the field. He's a great pass catcher. He's a guy that can play third downs immediately. And if he starts getting carries on first and second down, especially in between the 20s, he could become a 3-down workhorse before you know it. And he could be a guy that you're putting in your lineup every single week. Now, I can't have this guy too much lower. I'm sorry. I got him at number 20 just because I got the Saints going 0-17, and that's Alvin Kamara. I think this offense could be absolutely horrifically bad. Chris Olave has, injury history. Rashid Shaheed's coming off a major injury. Who's playing quarterback? Is it Spencer Rattler? Is it Tyler Shuck? Does it matter? Alvin Kamara's not a guy known for running up between the tackles. He's a guy you got to get in space. He's a prolific pass catcher. And he might catch a lot of passes. I just don't believe in the offense. I don't think they'll win a single game this year. But I can't have him any lower than 20 just because he will catch 50, 60, 70, 80 passes this year. Because if Chris Olave goes down, if Rashid Shaheed's hurt, they have nothing to speak of at tight end. They're going to have to throw to him. They have no other choice. And moving on to number 21, we got R.J. Harvey, rookie out of Denver. He's a guy, we were all over him before the J.K. Dobbins signing. All over R.J. Harvey. He's explosive. We know what Sean Payton does for running backs. We saw Alvin Kamara. We saw Mark Ingram. We've seen Reggie Bush. We've seen guys with this R.J. Harvey mold be extremely successful. He's a good pass catcher, highly explosive. My only reservations are, he's a more older prospect, but he's just more NFL ready. He's got a little more miles on his tires. So, but with the Dobbins signing, I had to drop him a little bit to 21 just because even though they split, Dobbins is the bigger back. He might get the goal line work. He might get the more important touches. So I got R.J. Harvey, 21. Now, 22, I can't have him any lower. He's probably going to finish, mid-teens, late teens, and that's David Montgomery. Every year, David Montgomery just feels like broccoli. A guy who's going to split with Gibbs, obviously. He's not going to be the RB1 in town. Not going to get a lot of pass catching work. But he'll get the between the 20s carries. He'll get some goal line work. He'll be a guy you can plug in as your RB2, week to week. And he's in an elite offense behind an elite offensive line. So you can't have him too much lower than 22. 23 is a guy, Tony Pollard. He was a guy that last year, he started off kind of strong. He had some games there. And then as the offense crumbled, he just kind of fell off. He got banged up last year. He was dealing with a lot of different injuries. And with the offense just being terrible, it was hard for him to succeed. The offensive line struggled. But this year with Cam Ward, even though I'm not the biggest Cam Ward fan, I can't deny that he's a clear upgrade over what they had last year in Will Levis and Mason Rudolph. So hopefully the offense will be better. Brian Callahan get this offense, get the wheels turning. Hopefully they take a step forward. They're not one of the worst in the NFL. Tony Pollard, he can catch passes. I do have my reservations because I do like Tajay Spears. He's a good pass catcher as well. So Tony Pollard may not be a 3-down workhorse back, but in an improved Titans offense, he might be plenty good enough to be your RB2. Now moving on to Aaron Jones, man. Aaron Jones at 24 seems criminally low because this guy went over 1,500 yards last year and was quietly one of the best running backs in the league. He was a great pass catcher, had over 400 receiving yards in an offense that, kind of surprised us after J.J. McCarthy went down. Sam Darnold was excellent stepping in, honestly. He finished, I believe, 6th or 5th in MVP voting. He was absolutely nutty last year. And Kevin O'Connell's an offensive genius. So Aaron Jones, easy RB2. They did bring in Jordan Mason, so he's a guy that you got to watch out for. He might be a handcuff. We'll have to, monitor that type of, usage situation. But Aaron Jones was relatively healthy last year. He is a guy that, nagging hamstring here or there. You got to watch out for that if he's questionable, blah, blah, blah. But as long as Aaron Jones is healthy, he's still one of the more explosive backs, averaged 4.5 yards a carry last year. He can get the job done as your RB2, no doubt about it. Now, this guy at 25, he's got a very wide range of outcomes, and he's a guy that could either be the steal of the draft or a wasted pick, and that's Isaiah Pacheco. Going in the mid-round, he looked horrible last year coming off that broken leg, and that's to be expected. Obviously, he broke his leg. But that's what we most recently saw, and he may be healthier, but obviously we know the Chiefs, they want to pass the ball. They got Marquise Brown, Rasheed Rice coming back healthy, Xavier Worthy hopefully taking a step in his second year, Kelsey coming back. Noah Gray even established himself as a decent threat and weapon last year, so they'll probably be more pass heavy. Pacheco does catch a solid amount of passes, so we just don't know if it's going to be more of a committee. They drafted Brashard Smith later rounds. I mean, they still have Kareem Hunt, who bleeds for dear God. Don't give him any carries. He's 3 yards in a cloud of dust. But, he's a guy, this offense will still be good enough for him to be, an RB2. Now, a guy that I have a love-hate relationship is my guy, Brian Robinson. I got him at 26. He is the definition of mid. In real life, in fantasy, he just is blessed to be in an offense that loves to run the football, especially down by the goal line, and is one of the better rushing offenses in the league because of Jaden, because of Cliff Kingsbury. Because if he was on not any other team, but a lot of other teams, he wouldn't be nearly as good as he looks or is. He stays banged up. They brought in Ja'Cory Cross-Guimaraes, who's getting a lot of camp buzz, who I think is like one of the biggest sleepers in all of fantasy. Ja'Cory Cross-Guimaraes for the Washington Commanders. I think Ja'Cory could flat out take his job this year. I seriously believe that. Brian Robinson, he's been, he's had a down year last year. He came in his rookie year, he got the gunshot wounds. We cut him some slack. And the next year, he really was fine. And this past year, he was okay. We need someone who can set the tone. He's not really explosive. So, he's a guy, he's fine as your RB2. He's a fine flex play on some weeks when they have good matchups, but doesn't catch a lot of passes, and he's really touchdown dependent. So, but when you get to this range, a lot of these guys, he's in the best offense by far. A lot of these guys are in bad offenses. They're RB2s on their own team. There's a lot of question marks. At least with him, he's in a good offense. We know he'll get the touches. He'll get the goal line work. It's just no explosion, no pass catching. Now, Caleb Johnson, rookie for the Steelers, just don't believe in the offense. I really don't. Doesn't catch a ton of passes. Jalen Warren's going to do that. He's the third down back. And, the Steelers just scream mid to me. The whole offense, DK Metcalf, your wide receiver one, mid. Caleb Johnson, Jalen Warren as your wide receiver core, mid. Really hard to believe you can get a top 24 season out of a guy like that when you're in a mid offense, not going to catch a lot of passes. He might be Brian Robinson, honestly. He might be Brian Robinson 2.0. Now, next we got Jordan Mason. Jordan Mason's a guy who was actually pretty good in the starts that he had for the 49ers last year, but now he's kind of the RB2 in Minnesota. He didn't really catch a lot of passes. Aaron Jones is a very good pass catcher. We don't know how much work he's going to get, but he would be an elite handcuff if anything happened to Aaron Jones. So you can't have Jordan Mason too much lower. Next, we already talked about a little bit. That's Jordan. Next, we got Jalen Warren. We already talked about him a little bit, but Jalen Warren is a guy that, he's going to catch a decent amount of passes. Aaron Rodgers loves to check it down. We remember Aaron Jones, all the passes he was catching. Breece Hall caught a decent amount of passes. So, obviously, Aaron Rodgers, not mobile guy. He will check it down. So, Jalen Warren might catch a few passes. He might catch a decent amount of passes, honestly, but I go back to just not believing in the offense, even though Jalen Warren might be the more explosive back. It's hard for me to be in on an offense that I don't think will score a lot of points and that I don't think will, be able to especially support two separate running backs. Now, rounding out the top 30, I got Dylan Sampson, man. I really thought Quinshon Judkins was going to be a fantasy contributor this year, a guy that you could count on as an RB2 at the minimum, even in this horrible Browns offense, just because that's how much I believe in Quinshon Judkins. But we all know what's going on with Quinshon Judkins and his off-the-field issues right now. So it looks like Dylan Sampson is going to step up and be the RB1 now. It still should be a very bad offense. And it should also be a very pass-happy offense, or at least that's what they were last year. They're actually one of the leaders in passing plays per game. So Sampson won't have the rushing upside, I believe. He's also a little smaller of a back. If he's going to be the RB1 on a team, especially with his pass catching ability, it's going to be hard for me to rank him any lower, especially when his only competition right now seems to be Jerome Ford, who, he's just a guy. So that rounds out the top 30 with Dylan Sampson. Now, next is a guy that I actually believe if he was in his own backfield, I would have probably a lot higher. And that's Cam Scatterbo. Cam Scatterbo, I think, man, if he played for the Browns or another team where he had the backfield all to himself, he'd probably be much higher in these rankings. I love the talent. He's a hard worker. He's a guy that coaches fall in love with because he gives it his all. He may not be the most explosive. He may not be able to take a 5-yard run, 75 yards to the house or anything like that, but he's a good pass catcher. He should be on the field a decent amount. He's a bigger back, bigger than Tyrone Tracy. He should get the between the tackles carries. He should get the goal line work. And he's actually surprisingly, especially for a bigger back, he's a pretty good pass catcher. So that's where Tyrone Tracy kind of struggled last year. Even though Tyrone Tracy was a converted wide receiver, he didn't really catch a bunch of passes. So I'm wondering if Cam Scatterbo can step into that role and be the pass catcher and get some early down work. He could be a top 24 running back, no question, even in this questionable Giants offense, just because of the volume. Now, rounding out the top 32, I got Zach Charbonnet. Now, Zach Charbonnet is a guy, he's not going to have a lot of standalone value as long as Kenneth Walker is healthy. But we've all seen Kenneth Walker go down. He's had oblique injuries. He's had hamstring injuries, ankle injuries. It just seems like it's always something with Kenneth Walker. So Zach Charbonnet is a guy that you have to pick up off waivers, that you have to draft with one of your last picks and stash him, because every time that Zach Charbonnet has been given an opportunity to be an RB1, he's absolutely crushed it. And he's honestly been more productive than Ken Walker in an RB1 role. So if this coaching staff gives Charbonnet any run whatsoever, and he gets any standalone value, he'll probably crush his ADP. And obviously, if anything happens to Kenneth Walker, he's a guy that you have to plug and play, and he's an RB1 every week. Now, some guys that just barely missed the cut, man. There's only 32 spots. I had to limit it to 32 names. A bunch of handcuffs and guys that, if something happened, or guys in bad offense. I got Tyler Algier. Obviously, Bijan Robinson is my RB1. If anything happens to Bijan, then Algier's an RB1 plug and play, no doubt about it. Tyrone Tracy had a nice rookie year. He wasn't really the starter until about halfway through the season, but once he started, he was a guy that you could plug into your lineup, and he was a solid RB2 on a week's basis. But to bring in Scatterbo, I think Scatterbo is going to be the RB1, so I can't have the top 32 this year. J.K. Dobbins, a guy last year who was an absolute league winner, it seemed like, for the first couple weeks until he kind of slowed down and then got injured there for a second. He's in a new offense, an offense that's begging for rushing production. They drafted R.J. Harvey in the first or second round. So, J.K. Dobbins, if he can stay healthy, he'll probably be a guy that you can plug and play as a flex option, or, an RB2 spot if you got bye weeks or injuries or anything like that. But he's not a guy that I would want to plug and play week one. I want to see the volume, see the role first. Tyjae Spears, a guy, I love the talent personally. I really do. Love the pass catching upside that he had. He's a decent runner between the tackles. And I think this Titans offense might go a little under the radar. And if anything were to happen to Pollard like it did last year, Tyjae Spears is ready to step up. And with Cam Ward and what should be an improved offense, I do see Spears and Pollard being better than what their ADP is right now. Trey Benson, second-year running back, one of the better running backs in what was an extremely weak class for running backs. But he was the second running back drafted. The Cardinals have talked about a 1A, 1B situation with him and James Conner. And we all know James Conner's injury history. If James Conner bumps or bruises, he's out 2, 3, 4 weeks. So Trey Benson is a guy that they're talking him up. Jonathan Gannon, the head coach, talking about, we got Batman and Robin. We got 2 RB1. So if they do give him standalone value this year, he's a guy that you're going to have to plug and play, especially if anything happens to James Conner, because this offense, even though Kyler Murray's underwhelming and all that, it's still one of the better offenses in the league. It's still one of the more high-paced offenses in the league. So Trey Benson's a guy you got to keep an eye out for. Same with Javonte Williams. If Javonte Williams ends up being the starter in Dallas, he's a guy you're going to have to start because he might have high-end RB2 upside. I just can't have him top 32 because We don't know the role yet. We don't know if it's going to be him. We don't know if it's going to be Miles Sanders. We don't know if it's going to be Jadon Blue. We don't know who's the pass catcher, the first, second, down, back, between the tackles, the goal line, the pass catcher. So it's hard to rank Javonte Williams right now, especially with how bad he was on the Broncos last year. The Broncos have one of the best, honestly, offensive lines in the NFL, especially when it comes to run blocking. And he really struggled to put up any type of consistent production last year. So he was a guy, when he was coming out of North Carolina, we all loved him. He was an extreme tackle breaker, a guy who could break long runs. But ever since that ACL injury, he just hasn't been the same. And honestly, it's kind of sad to watch. Now, last and certainly not least, our last honorable mention is going to be Isaac Guerendo, another guy who will probably have zero standalone value. But if anything happens to CMC, which we know stuff happens to CMC way more than we would like, Isaac Guerendo is a guy that you got to plug and play as an every week RB1. We all know that, the 49ers have probably the easiest schedule in the NFL this year. They should be leading a lot. They should be running the air out of the football. And if anything happens to CMC, Isaac Guerendo is next up. They traded away Elijah Mitchell to the Kansas City Chiefs. So there's absolutely no reason that literally anyone else should get any run. Jordan Mason's gone. He's in Minnesota. So the next guy up is Isaac Guerendo. We saw he ran like a 4.3 in the 40-yard dash. He's got plenty of explosion. He can be a guy that could put up easy RB1 numbers behind this Kyle Shanahan offense. So that was my top 32 ranking for the running back position, with a few honorable mentions included. I told you guys we're getting you every position, so stay tuned this week. We'll get you the wide receivers next. Thank you for tuning in to Dudes in Love with Football, the DILF podcast. I'm your host, Durag D. See you later.